Hello and welcome to this presentation about impact analysis and code maintenance for PowerBuilder. Let's start with a tricky case, an impact analysis, where you want to find all dependencies, all the references to a particular item before or after you make a change in order to understand the consequence of a change. A typical case is when you're changing something in a database and you want to know or you need to know which piece of code is referencing is using, for example, a database column. You can go for a string search, of course, but with a column called ID, you will have thousands of your occurrences. But right here, because we analyze and understand the code, we can run an impact analysis that will give us an exact list of references to that particular column. So if I go to the navigation bar, there is a section called cross-reference where I would find this option, impact analysis. And this will show me items presented in a TreeView. I can close each branch. You see there's some reference located behind the PowerBuilder application and other references inside a database, an Oracle database in that case. So if I look at them one by one, on the PowerBuilder side, I would see references to this database column. In this PBL, we have different objects. There's a data window with a retrieve SQL where I could find very short, very simple SQL. And there is a reference here to this particular column with a yellow background and a red pin right here. I have another example here with an item changed event. If I select it, I would see there is an embedded SQL statement, including a reference to the same column. A comment here about the source code. You see that we've been enriching the PowerBuilder code with tooltips. So anytime there is an active item, we have a tooltip explaining the nature, the name, the container of the object. Like this is a table in that schema. There's a data window here, etc. Okay, coming back to the result, we have other data windows that are referencing the same database column right here. Okay. And now if I'm going to the second part of the results, let's close the PowerBuilder side and open the database side. I see also some objects that are referencing the same column. So this is a view. If I click on the definition of this view, I see there's a reference to that particular column, PL SQL block, with a reference here in the embedded SQL statement. There is a trigger with several references to that column, etc., etc. This is a package. The same goes with stored procedure. So you can see another comment about the source code view. If there are many references, there is an index showing the line number so that I can scroll down and access directly certain part of the method where I can see the reference that I'm interested in. So this is one example of impact analysis where I find the reference to a database column. But in general, this concept applies to any piece of code because during the code analysis, we understood lots of objects, their nature, name, references, etc. So if I'm looking, for example, to find the references to a certain user object or a function, maybe I've been changing the prototype of a certain function and I would like to update all the calls to that particular function. I would open, in that case, the PBL, the object corresponding, and the function that I just updated, and then the same goes. Navigation bar, cross-reference, and impact analysis. Then I would see all the places where there is a reference to that particular PowerBuilder function. I can click here. Again, yellow background, red pin, same concept. And again, etc. So that's for references to database items, to PowerBuilder object, references to database code as well. I can, for example, find all the references to a certain stored procedure. And here I have two cases. Some references are coming from the PowerBuilder client. You see there's a data window with a delete method right here. There is a window with a command button with a clicked event where there is another reference to the stored procedure, and there is database object for which the code is also including a reference to the same procedure. But again, it's the same concept. And the last example I can make is when your PowerBuilder application is using or referencing DLL and DLL functions. That would happen if you're calling, I don't know, Windows API or just a driver for your printer. You can find here the list of all the DLLs referenced by the PowerBuilder code. And for each of them, you would see the functions, DLL functions that are referenced. And then the same concept applies. For each function, you can run an impact analysis to find all the references to that particular DLL function. It would show here the DLL, the object, the methods. If you click on it, yellow background, red pin reference. Now let's see another way of leveraging this information about the code, the object, the dependencies to help developer understand complex code and figure out how to change it. There's something called a CRUD matrix. CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. It's basically a matrix that with Visual Expert we are going to create in Excel, where you can see all the dependencies between data and code at a high level. I can generate this matrix for a number of tables or even all of them if I like. I would come here again, cross references, and select this option, CRUD matrix. And this is going to export the data and generate an Excel file with a two-dimension matrix. Each row corresponds to table. Each column will correspond to object using the table. Let's see how this looks like. You see here you have the calling object, and here you have tables. So we talked about the table column before. Let's take a look at this. We can see that this table is right here, used by this particular data window, and it's used for RU, which means read and update, in other words, for a SQL statement, select and update statement. There are other data windows, reading, updating. Then we see that there is a PowerBuilder event, item change event, that is including probably some select statement to read from the table product. There's another object here, PL SQL file, reading and updating from the same column. We keep going down. There is one procedure that we saw before, deleting from the table product. So in other words, that's a way, as you can see, to see at a high level the dependencies or which object, which piece of code is accessing this data, this table. You might want to check, for example, where am I deleting from the table product, because I'm reviewing the whole business process for managing product, and there are certain business rules that I want to double check. But this presents another vision of the dependencies. The impact analysis we saw before is very low level, at instruction level. This one is more at a object level, a higher level, if you will. You can start with this and continue with an impact analysis, for example, if that's what you're looking for. Another way of leveraging this information about object and dependencies consists in displaying a graph composed of functions calling each other. It's called a call graph. A is calling B, B is calling C, etc., etc. This is showing, for example, what's happening if the user is clicking somewhere in your application and you have tens or hundreds of objects calling each other, and a large volume of code is being executed, but it's hard to figure out exactly all the branches of this code graph. Right here, you can generate it automatically to understand better the inner working of the application and figure out if something has to be changed, maintained, fixed, whatever. Let's take a look on the PowerBuilder side first. I can select an object, and let's say that I need to know what's happening when I'm closing the application, because strange things are happening and I need to understand why, all what is executed behind this. I would just go to navigation bar, cross-reference, and ask for a call graph. This shows a chain of PowerBuilder function and event calling each other. So this one is calling this is calling this is calling this, etc., etc. You can take a look at the code, of course, to see what's behind it. You can actually also browse directly in the code itself, because we will, while transforming the PowerBuilder code, we also included hyperlinks. So anytime we are referencing an object or a method, you have a link and you can double click to see its definition. So if I'm clicking here, I reach this particular method, which is referencing a function. I can click on it. That's a tooltip explaining the name and location of this function. If I click, I see the code, another reference, another method, etc., etc. It's like navigating with an internet browser, a web browser, and like a browser, you can go back to previous pages or jump 5 pages before if you like. That's a way to understand the inner working of your application. This is on the PowerBuilder side. You can do the same on the database side. So let's select the same procedure I used before. And if I generate a call graph, this is what I'm going to see. This procedure is referencing another stored procedure. This procedure includes a delete statement referencing a table. This table is tied to another table with a foreign key constraint. So this one is also updated automatically. Another foreign key constraint is updating this third table, which will trigger this particular trigger, referencing a procedure, including an insert statement that is inserting in this table and which it in turn will execute this final trigger. Let's say that anytime I'm deleting an employee in the application, I have to call this procedure, fine, but I need to understand how come at the end I'm inserting in this log table. Well, this is why. This is all the chain of code that in the end result in inserting in this table. So this is also on the database side a way to understand what's going on when certain process or certain event are executed in the application. There is a similar concept of call graph, but at a higher level. In this case, between PBLs, because PBL can include object, referencing object from another PBL, which indirectly create references between PBLs. So in some cases, it can be useful to view like this, a call graph between PBL, for example, because you want to analyze the dependencies between different modules of your application, and you want to make sure the module number 1 does not include any reference to the module number 2, possibly. So you can view this call graph like this, where this PBL is including references to this list of PBL. You can even go deeper and ask, in this PBL, where are the references outside, which means in object located in other PBL. So this library includes this object referencing another object from another PBL. As you can see, not the same. And you have the exact list of dependencies. So in case you need to detach this PBL from this one, you know exactly where to go and where is the reference, right here. Another comment, instead of a call graph in the form of a tree view, you have like that the possibility to create call graph in the form of a diagram. And there are different features like that that are available both in the form of tree views or diagrams. You can detach the diagrams if you like, zoom in, zoom out. You can export them, print them, manipulate them the way you like. And when you select one entity in the diagram, you can see all the other entities that are connected to it to make it simpler to analyze and understand. That's for the call graph for PBLs, but you can do the same for any type of call graph, where you can again, in that case, see the call graph between PowerBuilder functions. And the last comment I wanted to make is that diagrams are connected to the source code view. When you select an item here, you can see the corresponding code on the right-hand side. Yet another way to explore and understand your code and its inner working. Still to remain in the high-level vision of the dependencies, you can view from the PowerBuilder side which sort procedure are used, either for the entire application or for a certain PBL, or even for each object, if that's what you're looking for. You can view the web services that are called and from which object they are called. You can view the DLL functions that are used and from where, etc., etc. You can even take a look at the system functions if that's something you're interested in to see where they are used for which object.